All right, everybody, welcome to our weekly Zoom call for Thrive Lives clients. It is, what's today's date? December 7th. So we're now officially like halfway through the holidays. Not that that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it is what it is. We're past Thanksgiving now, headed towards Christmas and New Year's. I was just talking to Gene before we got on here. It's 7 o'clock right now. I'm looking out the window, just so dark. It's tough to stay motivated during this time of the year. It's tough to stay focused on what it is that we want to do. Something always kind of helps me is just thinking about, regardless what I want to do at the moment right now, is that what is aligning myself for where I want to be at in 6 months. I tend to really prioritize where do I want to be versus what exactly do I want to be doing right now. At 7 o'clock, would I rather just be in bed chilling, doing something else? I mean, possibly so, but I'm also pumped to be on here with you guys as well with this stuff. In terms of working out or anything else, I might not want to get up at 6 a.m. to go do it. Especially when I'm tired, when it's cold outside, I'd rather just stay in bed for an extra hour or two. But assuming I've got my good sleep, I got to get to the gym and make that stuff happen. Tonight's Zoom call is going to be talking about some struggles I've personally been going through. I don't know this, but I feel like through the lens of in your guys' perspective, sometimes it might seem like, I'm living on this pedestal, like I'm perfect. I don't make any mess ups. I stay on my diet plan 99% of the time. And then I have my one cheat meal and that's it. And some of that's true to an extent, especially if I'm in comp prep, it's a different life then. But right now I'm just like everybody else, struggling with the holidays, struggling with the darker evenings and colder evenings here in Kansas City and stuff like that. So, I deal with a lot of the same struggles. The difference is, number one, I've been doing this for a long time for myself. And number two, obviously, and I think this is always an added benefit to me in keeping me on point is that I've got to, I got to walk the talk. I gotta show up and do what I need to be doing, especially if I'm asking you guys to be doing that same stuff. And ultimately, I know that it's what's best for me, short term and long term. So still making it happen, even when we don't want to, is always key. So before we kind of dive in, I just want to open the floor to everybody else. You're sacrificing your evening. Ideally, probably not just to sit here and listen to me. So if you guys have any questions pertaining to kind of the topic that we're talking about now, we're also going to be talking about flexible dieting a little bit, how they can go wrong, and a couple different strategies that I personally employ. But if you guys have any current questions on your mind at the moment, let's go ahead and tackle those before we dive into my topic. So I'll give you guys like a minute as I eat my cutie to let me know if you guys have anything. I've been putting these on a lot of people's diet plans. I love cuties, but 50% of them are awful. 50% of them are amazing. Usually it's like I'll usually eat two at a time, and one of them is awful, one of them is amazing. Anywho, enough about the cuties. Obviously, pop on in if you guys have any questions, anything you guys want me to answer or talk about. But otherwise, we'll kind of get diving into it. Let me pull up my notes here on some different things I've personally been struggling on. So I feel like it's key to kind of start back with, especially some of you guys here are new. I did my last competition, so I've done like 7 or 8 bodybuilding shows. I've been a pro natural bodybuilder since 2017. Yeah, 2017. I think I've done like 5 or 6 pro shows. I think the highest I've gotten is 3rd or 4th place in those shows. Fourth place seems to be like the perfect finishing mark for me with a lot of my shows. Anyway, though, so I did a 7-week prep after I got back from our 2-year delayed honeymoon to Europe. That was in July. So I got back. As soon as I got back, I locked into a comp prep. And my show was 7 weeks later. And I think I only had to drop about 17, 18 pounds to step on stage show ready. Maybe a little bit less than that, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. But I'll do a big reverse diet. My calories will be super high going into a comp prep, and I'll give myself 12 to 16 weeks to get cut down. So I'm not having to do it too fast, but also not too long either. In this situation, coming back from Europe, I had to just lock in, and ultimately I had to dig a lot deeper in terms of calories and doing more cardio than I ever have before. So it just made things a little bit more difficult for me. And then flash forward to, so I get to the comp or to show day. I'm eating about 1,700 calories at that time. I think the lowest I've ever had to eat to get on stage was maybe 2,000 calories. Usually I live in between 3,000 and 4,500 calories a day. a lot of that is through, reverse dieting and metabolism care and stuff like that. So I can't handle that much food. I don't just go 0 to 100 with it. But so I've been reverse dieting since September 10th, I think is what that show day was. So, I walked off stage at 1,700 calories, weighing about 157, 158 or so. And then I've gradually titrated my calories up, mainly in the form of carbohydrates and fats. So my protein has stayed around 300 grams. So for those of you out there saying that you're struggling getting protein in, I'm smashing 300 grams of protein a day or so. It's really not that hard once you've been doing it for a while. But anywho, though, so about 300 grams of protein. I think my carbs that last few weeks, I was on trace carbs there for a while. So essentially just veggies was all the carbs I was getting. And now I'm up to anywhere from, I think it was about 350 going into Thanksgiving, and my fats were probably around, I don't know, 90 grams or so. And during that time, going from 1,700 calories, about 3,500 calories, and I've been posting this on social media as well, kind of my own journey with it. I've maintained weight essentially pretty damn well. So I was crushing it for the first 2 or 3 months, and then obviously, coming into November time, things started getting a little more difficult for me. Leading up to that, I was tracking my macros very, very diligently. And one of the ways that I highly recommend you guys to track your macros is not to wait till the night. Like right now, I'm not tracking my macros of all the stuff I ate today. Ultimately, if you're waiting until that point, number one, give me 1 second. Bad dog. Sorry, my dog was digging in the trash can. Bad dog. Anyway, where was that here? So November comes, and part of my struggles was, after a comp prep like that, I want to give my wife Nicole, more time, or saying yes to more date nights, or saying yes to, let's go get together with this friend, have them over for food, or go out to eat and stuff like that. So more things like that. That's hard to navigate, even when you know what you're doing and you're tracking your macros and all that stuff. But so ultimately, leading to a little bit more cheat meals. And then ultimately I got really lazy tracking my macros for probably the last 3 or 4 weeks. I stopped tracking nearly as consistently. I was tracking, late. I wasn't planning ahead for a lot of things. Now, ultimately, a lot of my meals stay consistent, whether I'm tracking or not tracking, and I'm eating intuitively, which is really what I was doing a lot of that time, which was a nice break. It really was a good break from having to track my macros so diligently. But, you don't know what you don't know. What gets measured gets managed. And if I'm not tracking my stuff, then ultimately I'm sure that my carbs were sitting higher than what I thought they were. I was probably close to it, but especially with the added cheat meals, my weight started creeping up. So, there for the first 2 or 3 months, I was able to go from like 157 to maybe 160 after show day, eating double the amount of food. But then I started getting a little more loose, a little more flexible. And so that was kind of a trouble for me. And so I don't know why it was so hard for me to lock into tracking my macros. Really, I didn't commit to it. I didn't just say, okay, I'm just going to start tracking my macros again. And this week I've been crushing it, and doing well with that stuff. And I'm actually doing a little mini cut right now, before we go to Vegas for it's like the World Series of Bodybuilding, which is the Olympia. So I'm there with Underestimated for their expo and their booth. So obviously I want to look good and feel good for that. So taking off a little bit of the Thanksgiving weight and the vacation weight and stuff like that. So that's kind of one of the main ways that I've been struggling, but then that's kind of transpired into being, a domino effect and some other things, including, my energy has been less. And I think, again, our darkness that we're having here in Kansas City, with it just getting dark so early right now, is a factor of that. But I think more than anything, it's been my food's been off, which then has contributed to my digestion been off. I'm usually pretty good about going to the bathroom. I wake up, go pee and go to the kitchen, start getting dressed. I'll smash a couple of shaker bottles of water, so I get like 50 ounces right away, and then a small cup of coffee. And then usually I'm going to the bathroom to have a bowel movement, essentially. And really that's been a struggle the past month or so. And that's really not like me. But again, with my food being a little bit more off, I'm not being as focused on things. I think that was part of it. And then obviously eating out more often has been part of that as well. Something I also recognized was, my fiber was still on point. I still have my chia seeds and psyllium husk. But something that's always been a good staple of mine is avocados. And I haven't had avocados consistently for 6 months. So actually early this week or over the weekend, I went and picked up some avocados, and that's been, integrated back in my diet. And I've been going to the bathroom, no problem, every single morning, back to normal and kind of clearing things out. So that's been very, very helpful. So if you're ever struggling going to the bathroom, I highly, highly recommend, avocados if you enjoy them and if you have the fat to spare in your diet. That's one reason why I don't always like, having the avocados, because I want to use that fat on some other different things. Well, if I'm seeing that I'm struggling going to the bathroom and I'm feeling like I need to get those healthy fats and healthy fiber in, then I'll add that in. On everybody's diet plan, I usually either put chia seeds or a psyllium husk. I think a tablespoon of psyllium husk is like 12 or 16 grams of fiber. A couple tablespoons of chia seeds is like 10 or 11 grams of fiber. So boom, right there is like 25.
Marcus,
Yeah.
what is psyllium husk? Because I don't really like chia seeds.
Yeah, so my wife doesn't really like chia seeds either. It's a texture thing. It kind of, especially if you let it sit in the liquid for a little bit, it turns into almost like tapioca stuff. So psyllium husk is I use the ground version of it. I'll pull it up really quick. The downside with that is you got to chug it, because it starts kind of thickening the liquid that it's sitting into. So, if you add it to water, it starts thickening as it kind of sits in there. So
Okay.
it's a straight up fiber with it. I can send you a link off of Amazon. I think the little tub that I have in there is it says 454 servings on it for like $20, but each serving is only like, I think it's like a quarter of a teaspoon or something. So I recommend doing a full tablespoon. So that's 12 servings essentially. So you're getting about 12 grams of fiber, but that's a great thing. The way I personally recommend you drinking it, is just adding it to a protein shake. So just add it with a scoop of protein, or add it, to your morning shake, whatever the case is. You can get that in. I personally like having, a higher fiber shake in the morning time, and then depending on when I'm working out, and then definitely at nighttime. So usually I would have mine a little bit later, but I planned a different meal for tonight. So I already had my shake with my psyllium husk just now, and early when I got home from work, I had my chia seed serving essentially with that protein shake. So I definitely recommend those things. Obviously, avocados is helpful as well. I eat beans and I eat all this stuff. So my fiber is always really, really in check, but I have noticed that was a struggle. Thanks for that question though, Kaylee. Again, anybody else stop me if you have any other questions pertaining to any of this stuff. But so really the lack of tracking was my bigger issue with this. And again, sometimes I would get to the end of the day, I'm like, oh, shit, I didn't check my macros. And I thought, oh, I could go check my macros. And I'm like, oh, it's easier just to not do it right now. And again, that's really not like me, but here recently it just kind of has been. I've fallen into that mindset that I know a lot of you guys get into. That's one of our questions is, how well did you follow the nutrition plan? Are you tracking your macros? A lot of friends will say, or a lot of people in here will say, I'm following my diet plan, no problem. So I don't really feel like, I have the need to track my macros, which I also agree with. If you're following the plan to a T, and as long as you're watching that list and making sure you're sticking to it, then no, you don't have to track your macros, but it does help for a couple different reasons. I don't need to dive into them all super in depth unless you guys want me to, but you're understanding the value of food whenever you're doing this. You're actually looking at nutrition labels. You're seeing what's going to fit into your macros. And that also helps you understand, okay, when I'm walking through the grocery store, I can just look at the food and be like, okay, this is going to be really high in carbs. This is going to be really low in carbs. This is probably going to be really low in fiber or really high in fiber. Same thing with proteins, same thing with fats and stuff like that. The more you look at nutrition labels and the more you're tracking your macros, the quicker you're able to look at foods and understand the value it's going to give you. Sometimes we don't want to eat the food for the value. We want to eat the food because it sounds good and it tastes good. That's a perfect time for cheat meals. That's a perfect time to track your macros and be able to fit that into it if it's worth it to you to eat that food. But so that's one of the biggest reasons. But then obviously, let's say you run out of X, Y, and Z that's on your diet plan. You're like, what the hell do I do? Well, you haven't been tracking your macros, so you don't know how to go plug and play and adjust things to make it fit. So that's the other kind of perk to doing it. Now I'm big on, whenever you've been doing it for a long period of time, and you start understanding the foods that work for you, the amounts that work for you and stuff like that. should you just completely abandon your routines in terms of food? Definitely not. But do you have to track your macros? No, you can definitely eat more intuitively. And that's my long-term goal for everybody. My bigger issue, I can definitely intuitively eat and come pretty damn close to my macros and just kind of watch, this feedback, watch my digestion, watch the weight on the scale, watch my pictures and just see if things are changing. And that's why we measure all that stuff. And it's something I would recommend doing forever, because whenever you're just turning a blind eye to it, that's when things get out of control a little bit. So those are kind of big keys of that stuff. Looking here at my notes if there's anything else. So even with some of the things that I've personally been slacking on, I think it's really important to stop and recognize the things I've been doing good on. And same thing with you guys and your check-ins. What are some big wins for you guys is always a big thing that I want you to also recognize. What are you doing well? Something I have been doing well is more quality time with Nicole. At nighttime, I'm disconnected from my phone. I get that put up. Tonight's really the only night that I'm really on my laptop or anything else pretty late, till about 9 o'clock or so. So whenever I'm home and I'm chilling, that's exactly what I'm doing now. So that's been nice. Like I said before, while it's a downside to the nutrition side of things, it's an upside that I've been able to spend more time with friends and family and things like that. That's been good. Workouts been all on point for the most part. I've had some tight hip flexor situations here recently. I'd been slacking on stretching more often, which then leads to tight hip flexor for me. So that's something I always got to kind of keep in check. But outside of that, I prioritize getting to the chiropractor and then prioritize getting, stretching in a whole lot more. I'm seeing a new chiropractor tomorrow out in Lenexa. He does active release therapy, which not most chiropractors don't do. Some massage therapists will do. But I like having a good medical team at my disposal doing all different things. I have like 3 or 4 different chiropractors, all for different reasons that I use at different times, or I'll recommend to you guys at different times and based off location as well. So he's out in Lenexa. Funny enough, I met him. We were selling, we bought a new washer and dryer from Nebraska Furniture Mart. And so we were selling our old one, and he just recently divorced. And so he was like, I don't need anything fancy. I just need something that works. So he came and picked it up. And we talked about health and nutrition and lab work and hormones and all this stuff for like 45 minutes. And he actually might even become a client here soon, but then I'm also going to be a client of his as well. So it's funny how that kind of worked out. Something else I've been doing well is that even with my nutrition being off, I've prioritized protein no matter what. And this is something I always recommend you guys to do, is that, if you cannot be perfect, at least, try to hit the staples, try to hit the minimums. So for me, that's been, getting a certain amount of protein in. So I eat about 5 or 6 meals a day, including protein shakes. I include those as meals. But that's allowed me to still get in my 275 to 300 grams of protein per day. Water intake has generally stayed pretty on point, but there's been more days than I would usually allow for that my water intake has been off. So I've been really prioritizing getting that down. Really the big thing is you don't want to sit around and wait until 5 p.m. to be like, oh shit, I haven't drank any water today. And that's what I did like on Sunday. And I did that maybe a day last week or something. And that again is going to throw off your digestion. It's going to throw off energy. It's going to make you hold more water weight as well. So, if you tried it right now, if you said, okay, tomorrow I'm going to drink only 30 ounces of water, your weight's going to be up. Even if nutrition was on point, your exercise was on point, your weight will be up because your body's sucking on and holding on to all the water that it possibly can. So that's a good reason to always drink enough water. But yeah, so there's some things that I've been doing a pretty good job with, trying to turn off the TV by about 10 or 10:15. As I get up, usually around 6 to 7 o'clock, depending on the day. Something that helps me, and this is not just here recently, but just in general, whether I'm in comp prep, I'm not in comp prep, whatever the season of life is, even if I'm not tracking my macros, but especially if I am tracking my macros, I like to save. And I know some of you don't do this. I recommend saving a meal that you're really looking forward to the evening, like one of your last meals of the day. If you eat that meal for lunch and then you have other meals that maybe you're not as looking forward to the rest of the day, you're not excited for anything. You're not excited for any of the food that you're going to be eating. And that sometimes with a lack of discipline, is going to cause you to make a poor decision. Like, I really don't want this tonight. So then you're going to go make a decision that's kind of against what you're doing. Or you might make a decision that you can fit into your macros and be just fine with it. But so ideally, I like to save, one of my favorite meals for the evening time. I like to save a snack for the evening time as well. Eating past 7 o'clock, that doesn't make you gain fat. A lot of those stigmas, those myths and stuff like that have been preached and preached and preached for years. It's just not, it's not true. You're not going to gain fat because you ate after 7 p.m. Now, ideally, if you space out your meals throughout the day and then you only had one meal after 7 p.m., that's probably better. And that's better on digestion anyway. It's not exactly the best thing to go to bed on a crazy full stomach. And that is true with that. However, you don't have to have this certain cutoff time with your meals unless you're doing intermittent fasting. But even then, take it with a grain of salt and just, find balance with that. So for instance, it might sound crazy to you guys what I'm looking forward to, and this is going to be the meal that I have after the Zoom call. And after the Zoom call, actually, I have my podcast with Caleb that we got to record. But then after that, it's going to be, I think it's a cup of rice, half cup of black beans, 7 ounces of chicken. Probably some broccoli in there as well. A tablespoon of coconut oil, so 15 grams of coconut oil, which I've been loving, by the way. I've been adding to some people's diet plans. If you don't like it, use olive oil, use something else like that. But I personally love the coconut oil. And then on top of that, now the avocado as well. So it's a meal that I'm looking forward to. I'm going to go to bed satiated. And then I even have in my room left of my carbs today, because now I dropped my carbs to 200 grams just for the next week or two, to 200 grams. So I've got about 40 grams of carbs left to eat. So I'm probably going to eat like 4 rice cakes, chocolate rice cakes. And I look forward to those. Those are essentially cookies to me when I can't eat actual real cookies. But anyway, I'm going to kind of pause that for a second. Anybody have anything to add into that? Any questions about it? Questions maybe on my mindset whenever I'm struggling like that, anything like that? Nothing? No worries.
I have a question about beans. Can you
Beans.
consider that as vegetable or is that a different category?
I mean, technically, yes, it is a veggie, and it's going to provide some good micronutrients for you. It's going to provide some good fiber as well for you. I categorize that more. I look at that as more of, I mean, yes, veggies are carbohydrates, but most veggies are going to be lower in terms of carbohydrates, whereas beans are going to be a little bit higher. So I look at that as kind of comparable with like rice or pasta or breads and stuff like that. Even though it is technically a vegetable, it's got higher carb content. So I would categorize that more as just a carb that we're looking at versus necessarily a veggie. So if I say, hey, go smash a bunch of veggies today, I'm not necessarily talking about black beans or pinto beans or red beans, because if you have a cup of that, you're going to get 40 grams of carbs. Whereas if you had a cup of broccoli, you're going to get like 5 carbs. So there's a big difference there. If that kind of makes sense, Kaylee.
Yeah, I was just wondering because I'm still kind of struggling with hitting all my carbs for the day.
Yeah. So, and if you're struggling, so are you struggling because you're going over or because you're going under?
I'm under.
Well, that's a good problem to have. That means you got more carbs and room to play with. So yeah, beans would be a good thing to add into it. Like I said, for myself, with me having 40 grams of carbs left for the night after that last meal, I'll probably eat some chocolate rice cakes, and that's going to put me right at that 40-gram mark, pretty spot on. Maybe a little bit over that, but about that. And that's where, as many options as I can throw at you guys. Part of this stuff, especially finding your personal go-to foods, is you got to think about the things that you enjoy eating. You got to walk through the grocery store with that lens on of looking for foods that sound good to you, and then looking at the nutrition facts and be like, is this something I can fit in? Is this worth 30 grams of my carbs, or is this worth 15 grams of my fat? And some things will be, and some things you're like, that's not worth it. So kind of look at it through that lens. I can always give you guys recommendations and ideas, but also if you're walking through there and you're like, hey, would this be a good option? Let me know that. Ask that question. Maybe post it in the community so that maybe that question might be a question that 10 other people had as well. They just didn't ask it. And
Right.
when I go answer it, now your question just helped yourself and 10 other people as well. But yeah, so if you're under right now, that's a good problem to have, because then that gives you more room, more wiggle room, and more things you can kind of plug and play within your diet.
Okay.
Great question. Anybody else at the moment? Next, we're going to kind of talk about flexible dieting a little bit, and kind of the pros and cons of it, and when this can kind of go wrong. So again, stop me if you have something to kind of add into it, question wise or comment wise. But so flexible dieting, and I did a whole podcast on this with Caleb a while back on one of our episodes. If you guys are not listening, I do highly recommend. You have two different perspectives, two different coaches with a lot of experience, myself, and you hear a lot of what I'm saying, so you can hear kind of what he's saying as well in his perspective. Which some things are obviously eye-opening, and we did a whole podcast directly on the pros and the cons of strict dieting versus flexible dieting. And I like to use a little bit of both. He's much more on just only strict dieting. I'm much more on that a middle ground. There's a time and there's a place for everything. Now, what you'll see, especially if you're on Instagram or social media, and you'll see different coaches or whatever talking about flexible dieting, this can get really out of hand with people if they are prioritizing only tasty foods. They're like, hey, I can eat 10 Oreos because it fits my carbs and my fats for the day. Very, very true. You can do that. However, if you're only allowed, let's say, 100 grams of carbs right now, should you really get 100 grams of your carbs from Oreos? Probably not, because then you're getting no nutrients from that. You're getting no fiber from it. You're getting no protein from it. All you're getting is this processed carbs. You're still going to be hungry as shit afterwards, and you got nothing to show for it, except that now you're not allowed to have any more carbs for the day unless you're okay with going over. And if you're serious about your goals and you don't want to go over. So that's kind of where flexible dieting can get really off the rails, is people over prioritizing what sounds good, what tastes the best, things like that, versus what their body actually needs. So I think there's a good mixed approach with this stuff. I'm much more on the idea of, at least, especially for you guys, 80% of what you eat should be for the fuel it's providing you, for the benefits providing you. Obviously, we want to enjoy those meals. I don't want you just eating food because it's only good for you and you hate every bite of it. We want to find that happy medium of things you actually enjoy eating. But focusing on finding that balance of, okay, this tastes good and it's really good for me. It's giving me all my micronutrients. It's giving me all my macronutrients that I need to be hitting, especially protein and, healthy fats, obviously, and not a bunch of processed shitty oils, and stuff like that. So that's a big key with it, is prioritizing the nutrient dense foods versus just the tasty foods. But flexible dieting allows you to include more tasty foods in it. So that's, again, as I'm planning my night, when I plan ahead that, okay, I want to have that dinner that I already mentioned, after that, I also want to have the rice cakes, or I also have this tasty granola cereal that I'll eat instead sometimes. And that's also about 40 grams of carbs, but it's got like maybe 5 or 10 grams of fat in it. So I'm just going to kind of factor that in and plan ahead for that little bit. So I could also have that tonight. I could drop my coconut oil in half probably, and that makes perfect amount of room for that granola cereal. And the reason why I'm choosing that, because I could also have Lucky Charms. I could also have Reese's Puffs or anything like that. But again, when I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, this cereal, does it taste quite as good as Reese's Puffs or another, whatever your favorite cereal is? Maybe not, but honestly, it's like neck and neck already, except that this granola is also going to give me fiber. There's also a little bit of protein in it. And I know it's not just packed with, 30 grams of sugar like this is. This has maybe 5 grams of sugar, whereas this has like 30 grams of sugar. So, again, I'm thinking about, okay, what's worth it? Okay, they're both about the same amount of carbs, but which one is going to give me a better value and which one am I going to enjoy most? And just knowing that I'm getting more value out of this one and it tastes almost the same, it just makes more sense to go with that granola. So, again, planning ahead for what are things that I can look forward to all day. For instance, today and recently, whenever I drop my carbs like this, again, I want to save food that I'm looking forward to the rest of the day. So I'm totally fine being more hungry during the day, knowing that more food is coming later on in the day for me. I'm totally fine eating literally 7 ounces of chicken and I think it was like 6 ounces of broccoli with my my lunch and my second lunch today at work. Like, I'm totally fine with eating that. And there's, I put on Frank's hot sauce, whatever the hot sauces that I want to use, some sea salt, or even iodized just table salt sometimes on it as well. And that's usually what that's what I had today. That's what I had yesterday for my lunches, and same thing with Monday because I dropped my carbs with it. So, but even though I was thinking about it today, like as I was eating it, and how I could kind of express that to you guys, is that my favorite lunch in the whole world that I'm looking forward to so much? No, but I know that number one, it's going to be my protein, it's going to be my veggies for the day as well. And then that I know that I'm saving more of those carbs for later on that day. I also know that there's a reason why I'm doing this. I want to drop the little bit of Thanksgiving weight and some of that water weight that immediately goes to my stomach, as most people it does. But that's always frustrating when I'm like, I feel like I'm shredded everywhere else, and then all the excess weight goes straight to that lower stomach region, especially when I'm going to be around all these crazy in shape bodybuilders for 4 or 5 days next weekend. So that's kind of why I'm doing that. So I'm saving some foods that I'm looking forward to. And I highly, highly recommend that you guys do the same thing. And if you're just sticking to your diet plan, shift those meals around. If you don't look forward to meal 4, but you look forward to meal 2, then maybe flip-flop it so you can look forward to that later. The other issues with just tracking macros in general, and we've talked about this as well in here as well, so you can always go back and re-listen to that exact Zoom call that we did. But tracking accurately versus tracking inaccurately. I have a lot of people, probably even some people on here, that have sent me their macros before, sent me what they logged, even giving me like their MyFitnessPal login so I can go review some of their meals. And I'm seeing on there that just the entries are just off. It's not that you didn't go find, cooked chicken breast, or chicken breast in general. Maybe you found one that was raw versus cooked. Maybe you found one that had more dark meat in it, or whatever the case was. So like whenever you're looking at these numbers, it isn't just, okay, it says cooked chicken. There's 1,000 different cooked chickens on there. You want to find a cooked chicken that for 1 ounce has about 7 or 8 grams of protein in it. For 1 ounce of cooked chicken has about 1 gram of fat in it. And the way you know that is by you're looking at the diet plan. You're looking at, okay, coach has me at 5 ounces of cooked chicken, which says 40 grams of protein, and it says 5 grams of fat. So you want to go find very, very comparable, entries to log into it. Does it take a little bit extra work to find that exact one? It does take a little bit extra work, but maybe 20 more seconds, maybe a minute longer. But once you find it and you log it correctly the first time, it's always in your history. So next time you type cooked chicken, guess what pops up? The one that you found that's the accurate one. So I think that would, that's something that a lot of people I see make mistakes with it. Same thing with let's just say it's rice. Maybe your serving size is off. So Kaylee, you might be tracking your macros absolutely spot on, and you really are under carbs on it. You might be tracking something inaccurately though, especially if you're following the diet plan and you're logging exactly as the diet plan is saying. If you're logging exactly as it's saying and you're looking for the same entries as me, then maybe it's a serving size issue. Maybe it's something like that that's going on. And so again, trying to find entries that align closely with your diet plan is just a big help. And so that's, again, the reason why, I'm not just telling you go hit your macros. I'm saying, here's your diet plan. Here's the macros with those diet plans. Now let's try to marry the two together and find kind of what works for us with that stuff. So that's why I provide both options, as most coaches are either going to do one or the other. It's either a strict plan or it's just macros, and then giving you, the freedom to go track it, but then not double checking to make sure you're tracking things correctly. So that's one of the issues with tracking macros. And that's one of the issues with flexible dieting as well. And then in terms of, and I won't dive much more into this, but the pros and cons to tracking your macros versus just following the diet plan. The diet plan is going to get you the results that you want to get to, as long as you are sticking to it, communicating what you're doing, and then I can make specific adjustments based off of that diet plan. I can say, hey, cut the carbs from this meal, or add food to this meal, or whatever the case is. So if you're following that and we're building off and taking away from that, then perfect. You're smashing things. But then if that's the only thing you're doing, then again, you're limiting the amount of variations and the amount of flexibility that you have with everything else. You're really pigeonholing yourself to only eating those foods versus having freedom to mix things up and change things up. Whereas, but also for some clients, it's much easier. I just want a plan to follow. I have no problem eating the same food all the time. I just want a plan to follow that I can go execute. Perfect. That diet plan is going to work beautifully for you then, and that's wonderful. My client, before we got on here, she's not on the call, and she said, she was getting tired of her lunch meal. She's had the same lunch for 2 weeks now. Obviously, I'm different. The first thing that pops in my head whenever I hear that is that, well, I've been eating the same lunch for 10 years, but that's not most people, and I recognize that. I'm a robot when it comes to some of that stuff versus a lot of you guys on here. So, you know, when I think about it, I'm like, okay, so this is one tracking macro is going to benefit her. Okay, let's start looking at some different substitutions. Let's use the tools that I've given you in that client success document that's going to show you, okay, you're tired of chicken. Here is a list of proteins. Let's go find a protein that's going to work for you that you're going to enjoy eating, even if it's only for a few days or just a week to mix things up, and then you want to go back to chicken. But here's that list to go make adjustments with. And if you end up choosing a little bit higher fat protein, that's fine. But now we got to go look the rest of your diet plan to say, okay, what are we going to minimize that's fat wise? So again, now we're kind of toggling back and forth between the two, and that's what I do as well. You know, when I have a coach and they're giving me a diet plan, I'm going to track all those macros and make sure that number one, it's aligned with what they have on there. And since I know my macros so well and I know how to track it so well, I might even see if they have discrepancies on their plan, and then I might communicate that stuff as well. So it's important to kind of do both, but either way, as long as you're being communicative and what it is that you're doing 100%. You know, if you're tracking your own macros and eating your own flexible, you know, way, but then we're not seeing results, I'm probably going to say, hey, let's lock into the diet plan. I want you to follow that diet plan perfectly for a week or two, and let's see how your body changes then. And if you're all of a sudden dropping this weight, even though the macro is the exact same thing as what you were doing before, that tells us a couple of things. You're either eating foods that are not agreeing with your digestive system. You're eating higher inflammatory foods that are causing, you know, water retention amongst other inflammation within inside your body. Or you were not tracking your macros accurately before, and now that you're following a diet plan, you're on point. So just some kind of food for thought for everybody here. That's about it. That's really all I had planned tonight. Next week, we will be talking to Erica Schlotthauer, who has been with me for a little bit over a year, talking about her ups and downs. She's currently, the past 3 or 4 months, been absolutely crushing it. Prior to that, you know, she kind of had ups and downs, but I'll let her kind of explain some of that stuff. I think, you know, I've got a list of client spotlights I want to do. Krista, you crushed it on yours last month or October, whenever it was that we did it. You really set the bar pretty high, especially with your PowerPoint. I had to tell Erica, I was like, you don't need to do a PowerPoint. Like Krista did it, but you don't have to if you don't want to. It's more just a Q&A. You're just going to be an expert about yourself. So that'll be what we talk about next week. And I'm moving that Zoom call to Monday night. That works for her schedule. Also works for my schedule, as we're celebrating Nicole's 30th birthday the rest of the week, Tuesday through Thursday. And then I'm out of town after that. So I think we're probably going to do 7:00 again. I might move it up a little bit on that Monday night. Hopefully all of you that are on here right now can make it that night. It might actually open the door for other people that haven't been able to make some of the Zoom calls, since it's going to be on Monday night. But anywho, though, I appreciate it to all that are still on the call, all that could make it tonight, and all that are listening into the recording. I also mentioned on the community the other day about possibly turning this into a podcast to make it easier listening for everybody else. So that way you can listen on Apple or on Spotify, whatever you generally listen to it. I will be communicating more information on that as I make that transition, if that's what we end up doing anyway. But otherwise, friends, last few minutes, do you guys have any questions for me? Anything sticking out? Anything that you're struggling with this week?
Hey, Marcus, I have a question. Like, it's about cheat meals. Like, I feel like I follow the plan, you know, to a T and eat everything on there. And then when it comes to a cheat meal, it's like I almost feel guilty that I don't really want to screw it up too bad. So I tend to look for, I've had, I think, 2 cheat meals minus Thanksgiving. The first one was Chipotle, and then the other one was longboards. But what are some other like I don't want to go to Culver's and get a bacon cheeseburger. You know what I mean? Though it sounds good, but
yeah.
I mean,
So I mean, good question. I get where you're coming from. Like you're like, I'm doing so well eating all this healthy food. Like I don't want to screw it up by eating something off. And you're going to be surprised that, you know, I'm sure you didn't feel terrible after the Chipotle or after the longboards, but you're going to be surprised that it's not going to be a detriment to you. Now, if you were somebody, you know, that's currently on like a gut protocol, and I'm like, hey, I really need you guys to avoid alcohol, gluten, and dairy, and then you go and just splurge and all that stuff, that might reset the whole gut protocol, or something of that nature. If there's a higher need that you need to avoid it, then I will communicate that. But otherwise, Your cheat meal is whatever you want it to be. Your cheat meal is whatever you eat in one sitting. Now, that doesn't mean go do a food competition and try to eat, 10 pounds of pizza or something like that. But, obviously eat within reason, but at the same time, enjoy yourself. Something I personally, and this is honestly what Nicole and I used to do a lot more of, what we do, we call them double dinners. So we would go to, for instance, we'd go to, longboards, and then we'd go to another place, Chick-fil-A or something else like that, and then bring it home and make that kind of almost like a little cheap date night and just eat it while we're watching Netflix or a movie or something like that. So then I'd end up having like 2 sandwiches from Chick-fil-A, and I have a longboards wrap, and I would just smash all that stuff. But you don't need to feel bad about it. When you would feel bad about it, or when you're really making a mistake, is if you allow that one meal, let's say you have it at 5 p.m. and then you go and have another shitty meal at 8 p.m. that night. Now you just doubled up on meals. Or if you were like, okay, well, I had that cheat meal on Friday night and that snowballs into Saturday and Sunday, and now you just had 2.5 days of cheat meals essentially versus just the one. The one is not going to be a problem. You're already in a deficit, your body's losing weight, and that little bit of a spike in calories, it's going to actually do better, more good than harm in that situation, as long as you lock right back in with that. Not to mention it's good mentally, and it's good mentally to prepare for that. It's good mentally to think ahead of what sounds good to me. And maybe you're planning ahead for it. Maybe it's a Tuesday and you're like, okay, my cheat meal is going to be on Saturday. What do I want to have for that? And I do recommend planning it out. So you don't willy-nilly on a Thursday night go have a cheat meal, and then you had plans on Saturday or something like that. So you do want to plan ahead, plan out when you're going to have a cheat meal. If you have multiple occasions all week long, then let's figure out the one that's going to be your cheat meal, and then let's moderate the other ones. Let's just pick the higher protein options on the other ones and stuff like that. But don't feel bad about one. I do recommend pizza, heavy cheesy, especially like the Americanized Mexican food and stuff like that, is usually going to be it's very, very high inflammatory foods, a lot of grease, a lot of bad oils and stuff in it, a lot of cheese and dairy and gluten and all that stuff. So those are going to be higher inflammatory foods. So I don't recommend doing those all the time. Like, I wouldn't say go smash a large pizza from Papa John's every single weekend. Like, I wouldn't recommend doing that. But prioritize when it makes sense. Me personally, my favorite cheat meals are like sushi. So Gene, what prior to this, what would be one of your favorite meals that you would have?
Chimichanga, man. It's the best.
What? Chimichanga?
Chimichanga with beans and rice.
Okay, but so here's the thing as well then. Have you had your cheat meal yet this week?
No.
All right. So smash it the next few days. Plan ahead. Think, whether it's going to be Friday night or Saturday night. Ideally, it's not a day or two before your check-in day, just because that's going to skew things a little bit. And your weight likely will be up. But execute everything else. Eat all your normal meals. I do recommend on whenever you're going to have that cheat meal, drop one of your meals. I usually drop my higher carb and or higher fat meal, like collectively. I drop that off the diet that day, and then I have that cheat meal, because that cheat meal is probably going to take me over my calories anyway, but at least I didn't eat all 2,000 calories or 3,000 calories in my diet plan, and then I just had 1,000 or 1,500 calorie meal, and that put me way over. Not that that's going to be a huge problem either, but you don't need to stuff yourself like that either. So I would just drop off one normal meal. And so this weekend, plan that ahead. Whatever your favorite place is to go have that, even though it is, a Mexican food type food that might be higher inflammatory. Let's just see how your body responds to it. Do you struggle with digestion the next 3 or 4 days? So a lot of this stuff is kind of is trial and error, testing what works. If it works just fine for you, your weight comes right back down within the next day or two, and you end up hitting new lows that next week, and you felt fine in the process of doing it, then okay, then it's not that bad of a food, and you can have that as more of a consistent cheat meal. If you just get absolutely wrecked and your stomach just hurts all damn week and your weight is still up 2 pounds on check-in day, and that was the only thing that was different, okay, then now we know that we probably reserve that for few and far between. But again, trial and error with it. And if you're controlling 90% of your week, or, even better, then you're going to see results regardless of that one cheat meal.
Right on. Thank you.
Cool, brother. Enjoy it. I'm expecting to hear about that on your next check-in day of how you enjoyed that cheat meal.
Will do, man.
Good deal, brother. Well, anybody else? Kaylee, Krista, Dexter? I appreciate all 4 of you consistently being on the Zoom calls as well. The people that were on earlier, they've also been super consistent as well. And I think it hopefully it's helping in one way, shape, or form, even if it's just kind of keeping you focused and in line with stuff. But anyways, friends, have a great rest of your guys' week. Have a great weekend. Hopefully the Chiefs don't disappoint us again this weekend. And yeah, I'll see you guys on check-in day tomorrow. Have a good night. Have a good week.